So on Thursday, both Christine Blasey Ford as well as Brett Kavanaugh, they're going to be before the Senate Judiciary Committee. That much you know. And while the nation waits for answers on what they're going to say and how they'll say it, there's still a lot of questions that probably will not be answered when it's all said and done, like about Kavanaugh's position on hot-button court issues that we never got the answers to, or what's in all those documents the committee never got to see, or questions about his finances, which to many are still open-ended. But we may get answers, or at least questions about Kavanaugh's yearbook, complete with a slew of references to heavy drinking, the name of a woman Kavanaugh and a group of his friends listed as a possible sexual conquest, something else that Kavanaugh also denies. And as we mentioned earlier, Republicans in the committee, they won't even be the ones asking questions to either the judge or to Dr. Ford. The 11 male Republicans on the committee, they have hired a woman to serve as outside counsel, so she will be the ones asking the probing questions of both Ford and Kavanaugh. Now, perhaps they're trying to avoid a repeat of the Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill fiasco in the hearings of '91, and also avoid moments like these.
You took it to mean Judge Thomas wanted to have sex with you, but in fact, he never did ask you to have sex, correct?
No, he did not ask me to have sex. He did continually pressure me to go out with him, continually.
Are you a scorned woman? Do you have a militant attitude relative to the area of civil rights?
You are not now drawing a conclusion that Judge Thomas sexually harassed you.
Yes, I am drawing that conclusion. That
well,
is
then I don't understand.
Pardon me?
Then I don't understand.
The witness did not say anything to the FBI about the described size of his penis, the description of the movie Long Dong Silver, about the pubic hair in the Coke.
The Thomas nomination, along with the rejected nomination of Robert Bork, are widely assumed to be turning points where the Supreme Court nominations became hopelessly politicized. Now, that's true in how the Senate handles court hearings, but not in how partisan the Senate Supreme Court votes have been. Before Thomas, Senate votes were almost always close to unanimous. Besides Bork, the only nominee to get any no votes of this era was David Souter back in 1990. And after Thomas, both Stephen Breyer and Ruth Bader Ginsburg were confirmed by huge, nearly unanimous margins. But that trend really changed, though, in the George Bush administration. John Roberts, he got 22 no votes for his confirmation, and every nominee since has had at least 30 no votes as well. So what should we make of these trends? Just how unusual is it when we're seeing, or what we're seeing with Brett Kavanaugh? And is this really the best way to pick our Supreme Court? For that and more, let's bring in Emily Gold-Waldman. Emily, a professor of constitutional law at Pace University. And let's do some of the process first. I get the optics. You don't want 11 white guys questioning both Dr. Ford and to a lesser degree Kavanaugh. But the idea that simply outsourcing it to another person makes it go away, I think is naive at best. In the end, gender's huge in this conversation, and the questions that will or won't be asked of Judge Kavanaugh by the mouthpiece for the Republicans, I think are going to be extremely notable, and how she treats Dr. Ford as well. Do you think practically as well as politically this was smart, or do you think in the end, whatever's asked, it doesn't matter if it's asked by outside counsel or the senators, it's still going to be from that side?
It still is from that side. I understand why they did it, because they don't want little clips of one of them questioning her to then be used in commercials against them, videos against them. It denies those optics to the other side, and I think that's probably why they did it. It's sort of interesting that on one side you'll have this outside counsel doing it. On the other hand, the Democratic senators have said they're doing it.
I think it's an obvious answer, but it's complicated, I think, with political calendars and everything else. And that is, Emily, what is the purpose of Thursday, and what are the standards? And obviously I get it, you know, new revelations came out. We may even have an additional revelation with what Avenatti says he will or won't be able to deliver on before the Thursday hearings. But is it a search for the truth? Is it, this isn't a criminal case, this is a job interview. What is Thursday, should Thursday be about? And do we know where the line will be? Will it have to be, we'll know it when we see it, as to who to believe?
I think really what the standard is what the senators, the individual senators who are voting, decide that it is. Because you're right, this is not a criminal trial. If it were a criminal trial, we would know that the standard is you have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Even if it were a civil trial, there'd be a standard, and it would be you have to prove it by the preponderance of the evidence. This is none of those things.
And if it was a search for the truth, the FBI would have, like it was in the Anita Hill hearings, the FBI would have been employed here to use and try and get more clarity as to what did or didn't happen 35, 37 years ago.
Right, there are different things you could do, but I think the thing is, in the end, right, the senators have to decide how they want to vote, and they may have standard in their own mind. Some senator in his or her own mind might say, you know what, unless I think beyond a reasonable doubt that this happened, I'm going to vote for him. Another senator might say, I just have to be convinced it's more likely than not, and it's really up to them to decide.
In terms of picking justices after the nomination to see who's confirmed or not, obviously, as we mentioned in the beginning of the segment, the hypocrisy of McConnell being outraged by all this after Merrick Garland for more than 400 days sat in limbo without a hearing, let alone a vote. Okay, but when you go through the trend line of how the votes were cast, Ginsburg, clearly a liberal, a very progressive justice in her worldview, she was voted nearly unanimously.
Right.
It used to be, unless the person had an unbelievably egregious position or there was something in their background that would be disqualifying, if the person was a brilliant jurist, they get onto the high court. That's changed. Is that good or bad? Even before the allegations came up about sexual harassment or assault or whatever the case may be, a lot of people were solid no votes because they weren't sure if Kavanaugh would be the deciding vote the other way to upend Roe v. Wade, or where he stood in executive power, or a host of other issues. How would you like to see a person vote? Is it on the judicial record or their qualifications?
I mean, I think you're right. We've had a huge shift, and I think it is a shame. I really think it's too bad that now the Supreme Court is seen as just another political institution. And it's hard to avoid, I think, at this point, seeing it that way. I understand why people do, because you have these 5-4 splits, and now it lines up with justices who are nominated by Democratic presidents voting in a block one way, justices who are nominated by Republican presidents voting the other way. Even when we still had a Sandra Day O'Connor, even a Kennedy, right, who sometimes swung, I think it was less of that. Now we don't have that at all anymore.
And frankly, it was Justice Kennedy in many ways, where conservatives said never again. The Federalist Society said, listen, we trusted in Reagan and then Bush one here that we liked them as justices, but they voted not the way we wanted
and
to. From now on,
Souter even more.
Souter even more.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you're right. We're going to be sure what we're getting going forward, and you've gotten on both sides very much justices that you know what you're getting when you vote.
For the most part, that's true. And I think, of course, there are some cases where you have these interesting alliances that aren't like that.
Roberts,
but on the
Obamacare, right? Yeah.
Right. So that too. But I was going to say, generally, on the hot button social issues, which are the things that people pay the most attention to, it does tend to divide along liberal conservative lines. So I can see why people think of it as just another political institution, and that really does, I think, hurt its legitimacy too, because then at that point, well, then why aren't these things just being decided by elected officials? If it's just political, why is it being decided by people who are appointed?
I've heard argued, hey, this is an example, if ever, with Kavanaugh, why you have to fight every nomination tooth and nail, why you have to draw it out as long as possible, because something may come up. I have a feeling, regardless of one's politics at home, what we're seeing with Kavanaugh will be the new normal with every justice going forward, where they're going to try, and I'm already seeing people offering any dirt on anyone that they can possibly find here to bring out. Now, some may be merited and should be disqualifying, right? But it wasn't always this way.
Right, I think that's true. And I think also some of it is the culture and social media and things like that. So when things come out, they get more attention. I mean, I don't know if it will happen for every justice, in part because there may not be something to come out about every justice. I was thinking about it with Judge Gorsuch. Nothing like this came out. That's not to say this time it's true, but I guess when people say, oh, it's just going to be every single justice, I mean,
Yes,
that
it
didn't
depends
happen
on the
last
person.
year. That wasn't that long ago, and there was a lot of bitterness about that nomination because that was seen as a seat that should have gone to Garland.
Expectation for Thursday?
I do think hearing from someone directly can be very telling, and they are going to get cross-examined. Sometimes cross-examined can yield some interesting, unexpected points, right? I'm sure they're both practicing and preparing for what they're going to say, but still, in the heat of the moment, you don't know what may come out. So I do think maybe something will come out.
Well, I know we'll be watching, if nothing else.
For sure.
Absolutely. Emily, thank you as always. Up next, the Rosenstein Watch. Will President Trump fire his Deputy Attorney General and gatekeeper to Robert Mueller? And why did our reality show president just schedule the biggest meeting related to the Russia probe so far at the same time as the Supreme Court nominee faces the music on Capitol Hill? All things Rosenstein, straight ahead.